All right, everybody, thank you so much for coming to the second webinar of the Night Check Calving webinar series. Today we have Dr. Megan Van Emon. Megan is in Fort Keogh, which is in Miles City, Montana. And one big thing that we are always looking for when we are preparing for calving season is feeding those cows throughout the year, but especially before and after calving season. So Megan has a really great presentation that she has provided for us. So I will give the reins to Megan.
All right, thanks, Rose. Can you see the slides and everything okay?
I can. Can anybody else? Also, I should say, if you want to, you can also put, there's a chat box here. So you can put your questions in there and we can either do them as we go, or we could probably just do them at the end. So if you have a question and you might forget it, just throw it in the chat and we'll get to it.
Okay. Well, thanks everybody for being on today. I know, well, I guess I don't know where everybody's at, but I know in Miles City it's 55 degrees and sunny. So hopefully it stays this way. I'm kind of enjoying having a fall versus the last few years where we go from, you know, 60 degrees one day and then all of a sudden it's 20 and snowing. Yeah, so we're going to talk a little bit about pre and post calving nutrition and kind of walk through some of that and maybe some tools we can use to determine how our cows are doing. Oh, well, if I can get, okay, there we go. All right. So the biggest one, you always kind of wonder about is why are we discussing nutrition both pre-calving and post-calving? And it's mainly based on those nutrient requirements of those cows as those fetuses during late gestation start to grow exponentially. You know, we're starting to get into the higher nutrient demands. But this also leads into our colostrum quality and our milk quality and quantity as we move into the spring, as well as into early lactation, and then hopefully successfully preparing them for their next breeding season. But also weather can play a huge role in that. And also we're kind of fighting against the poor forage quality and potential quantity during this time as well. During post-calving, this is our highest nutrient demands for that first 6 to 8 weeks post-calving. That's when we're going to reach that peak lactation. And we're trying to get that cow to provide all of those nutrients to that calf, and the calf's really relying solely on the cow to provide everything it needs to get growing and get ready for the summer season. But also during this time, right, the uterus was repairing itself and we're getting ready for that next breeding season. Still, weather can play a pretty good role in that. And depending on when you calve, we could still be in those limited forage quality and quantity time frames. So the reason we talk about late gestation, if we just look at this old graph here, but that last 90 to 100 days of gestation, the fetus is growing exponentially within that cow. So we're probably talking a 15 to 20 pound fetus at the end of mid gestation, going all the way to that 80-pound calf full term there at 9 months. So this is the reason why we really focus on that, because there's a lot of different developmental stages throughout there. And we're going to need extra nutrients for that and ensure a healthy calf on the ground once we start our calving season. Then we move into our lactation curve here. And like I said, that kind of 6 to 8 week time frame is that peak lactation. And this can be, I would say it's kind of becoming a little more prevalent here in what we're considering, because we're looking at milk quantity and milk quality for those calves, but looking at some of those milk EPDs and trying to manage both the milk EPD while still maintaining a good cow that's going to keep rebreeding for us every year. And so it's monitoring that and making sure we aren't selecting really heavily sometimes on that milk production, because that in turn then usually means a cow that's requiring more nutrition, as well as usually a bigger cow. Even though they are then able to provide that to the calf, we can have some other impacts there on that milk EPD. So to kind of give you an idea of what our 1,400-pound cows are looking at for nutrients, and we use 1,400 pounds as our basis. You know, the national average keeps kind of creeping up on that body weight, and really right now it's between 1,350 and 1,400 pounds. And this is a question I always ask, you know, should Rose or an agent or a producer ask me about maybe developing some rations for their cattle, and what is the body weight of that cow? Because that really impacts the requirement demand. And so that's why I always put in that 1,400-pound cows. And in all likelihood, you know, we're talking probably close to 1,000-pound heifers at this point. So there are some differences there probably than what we consider what we had even 10 to 20 years ago in that cow size. But just to kind of point out, I never remember if we can actually see my mouse or not, to be honest with you. But we're kind of in this mid-gestation range right now, especially for those kind of March to April calving herds. And mid-gestation's our lowest nutrient requirements during the year. And that's because that calf has been pulled off, right? He's freshly weaned. And that fetal development really isn't ramping up yet until we get to that last 90 to 100 days of gestation. So this is also a great time to look at, maybe we have some thin cows out there and we need to add some extra nutrition in to get those cows back up and going so they're prepared for their calving season and then hopefully into that next breeding season, right? We're always thinking ahead, and what is that calf going to look like at the calving time, but also then how are we getting prepared for that subsequent breeding season. Then we're going to move into late gestation, or what we call the pre-calving phase. And the reason I have this TDN, which is our energy value, and our protein circle, is these are the two big ingredients we really look at on those nutrient analyses for those feedstuffs, but also where the biggest demands are for our cattle. And then we get into, there's a little bit down here in calcium and phosphorus for those element or mineral demands, but those are usually the smallest amount that we're having to provide. But we can see here the jump from mid-gestation to pre-calving is about 3 pounds of energy and a little over half a pound of protein above mid-gestation. And we have to remember, this is also these cows at maintenance, right? They're in good condition. We aren't looking to really add a lot of extra body condition onto them. This is just their maintenance requirements to keep that fetus developing, as well as their own health and progress and production. Then we really ramp up those requirements during post-calving or that early lactation phase, right? We've increased now from mid-gestation, if you're thinking about now, to post-calving. You know, we're doubling those requirements almost to keep our cows going. And that's that lactation demand, uterine repair, and then getting everything ready to go for the next breeding season. Hopefully, you know, by that 60-day window post-calving, those cows are ready to go. So we're really looking at this increase in requirements here, and everything gets set up kind of back at this mid-gestation phase for the following year and how those cows and those calves are going to perform. Here's just some pregnant heifers here. This is a 1,000-pound heifer, just to get you an idea. They're getting ready to go through that first calving in the spring here, and we are seeing, you know, that increase in requirements. And the big thing we want to consider is, as we're in mid-gestation here and that fetal development isn't the greatest, but we're also still asking her to continue to grow up through and to this pre-calving phase. So she's still trying to put on her own body condition for her own growth potential during this time frame while growing that fetus. We go into pre-calving, we're probably not going to be able to feed her enough to meet those growth requirements. So we're hoping to keep her just holding steady. And then once we hit post-calving, she's really not going to be able to eat enough feed for us to continue a positive growth in the sense that she's going to be gaining that 1 to 2 pounds a day. We look to that after that post-calving phase. But the most difficult group is actually once we get to this post-calving phase for these heifers, and then getting them ready to rebreed that following 60 to 90 days post-calving into their second calf. So this is the most difficult group we kind of focus on because they require that extra labor, they require that extra feed. And really, in terms of thinking about that rebreeding, is keeping those heifers on a positive plane of growth and nutrition throughout this entire, uh, oh, you know, well, close to half the year, 6 months, if we're thinking, 60 to 90 days mid gestation, 60 to 90 days and up to 100 days pre-calving, and then that's 6 to 8 weeks or 50 to 60 days post-calving. We're really focused on just keeping them growing positively and keeping that nutrition into them, and having that positive plane of nutrition can really help with our next subsequent calf crop breeding success. So just another way to look at those requirements, right? Pink is the protein here. Blue is this energy value. So they require a lot of energy in pounds, little bit of protein, very, very minute amounts in the minerals. However, I always recommend a mineral program. They are extremely crucial for fetal development and maintaining that reproductive factor for not only for our cows, but then making sure those bulls are ready to go for their breeding season too. But we're here kind of in November down here on the right? We're in kind of that mid-gestation time frame, and we can see by the graph that our requirements are at their lowest. Then we kind of keep ramping up all the way to this post-calving phase. So the most crucial phase, like I said, to gain weight is this mid-gestation, but just getting us prepared and ready to go for actually the next breeding season is our pre-calving phase, because we know those cows during some times are going to rely on their own body condition to meet their requirements. Once we hit the post-calving phase, energy requirements are at their highest, and we're asking them, hopefully at that point, to go graze and get ready to go for that next calf. But a lot of times from March to May, it depends on the year if we're going to have forage available. So saving some of those higher quality ingredients for this 3 months out of the year can really help us set up for a successful breeding season for the next calf. So this can be an extremely imperative time. However, even with those high quality ingredients, a lot of times our cows almost can't eat enough and utilize those nutrients efficient enough to be able to add any extra body condition and things like that. So that's why this mid-gestation time point is so important, because this sets us up all the way through till our next breeding season with that body condition. So a few things, we talk about supplementation, and I'm thinking about things like right now versus and late gestation, whereas when we get into that early lactation period, we're probably pretty darn close to full feeding those cows as much as they can. And who knows what this winter is going to be like, because I've heard every forecast under the sun going into this winter. Rose and I were talking about that, did everybody get moisture this last week here? It is so little, is it really going to help us? But the big one with this is, how do we effectively supplement our cows to help us maintain that body condition and move us through to that next breeding season? So the big one is what kind of pasture availability do we have? Have we stockpiled anything? This time of year, we may have some stockpiled forage out there. But as we move into those higher requirements, we're going to have to start looking at different supplements to help us meet those nutrient demands. What's the weather going to do? I don't know. I wish I did, and I wish I had that crystal ball. But I mean, I just kind of keep crossing my fingers that, we're going to get some good moisture this winter. We're going to lead into a really good spring. I wish I could even tell you what average is anymore, or normal. So there's some things to consider. And then we've got, what's the quality of that forage? What do our cows look like body condition wise? When are you calving, so we can determine when those requirements that are increasing going to hit? Should we be looking at our heifers versus our mature cows? But the big one, I can talk about a lot of different types of supplements, but the big one is what's available to you in your area. And I always like to think, we all want to, I wish we had a silver bullet to help us with everything, but never underestimate the power of a little bit of a supplemental alfalfa or even a higher quality grass hay to meet those cow requirements. But the big one, right? What's it going to cost and how easy is it to feed? I mean, we can talk a lot about different things, but if you can't find a way to feed it effectively and cost effectively for you in your operation, it doesn't really help. So I just like to throw this slide in here because we're looking at some different requirement changes based on the weather, right? And a lot of our weather indicators or environmental indicators from our requirements were established back in the 80s. Um, and that's kind of what we still use. And we know the rule of thumb: for every 1 degree below 32 degrees, we increase energy requirements 1%. That's the rule of thumb. Well, and we only discuss energy. We know everything goes up as the temperature drops. So we're looking at hopefully being able to provide at least some of that. However, as we get into some of these times when we're at minus, obviously we get colder than minus 15. But I just don't like to think about it, but I know there are times where it's minus 40, minus 50 degrees out there during the winter. And so how are we effectively feeding those cows? And the big one I like to consider, we look at stimulated intake down to about 5 degrees Fahrenheit for our herds. But when should I be feeding those higher quality feeds versus some of our lower quality feeds? And how do I feed them through that minus 30, 40, 50 degrees with a wind chill, effectively with what I have available? And the one thing I always kind of laugh at is in these environmental models and things, the lowest impact they have for a lot of their wind chills is a 10-mile-an-hour wind, right? I mean, let's face it, it's Montana. We can get 60-mile-an-hour winds, and it's, even at 0 degrees, that's a huge wind chill factor. We just can't physically feed our cows enough during some of these times to allow them to keep meeting their requirements. So there are some times where I recommend at those really extremely cold temperatures, feed that lower quality forage. It allows it to sit in that rumen a little longer, keep that heat going for them until we get to some of those nicer days. Also, acclimation to the temperature can really play a huge role in our cows. If they have a chance to build that winter hair coat, we can lower that lower critical temperature from 32 to 18 degrees for some of our animals. And therefore, hopefully, not having to, as large of an impact on our nutrient requirements. So we're going to walk through a few types of supplements here. And type sometimes is more not only how we're feeding it, but also is it what I would consider like a high protein supplement? So like the 30 to 40% protein range, or what I would consider a moderate protein supplement in that 15 to 20% protein range. And the reason I call one high and one moderate is the high typically includes what we call non-protein nitrogen, which can increase that protein need, which can be extremely important during times when maybe we're running short of a rumen degradable protein source. Or we have the moderates, which probably use more of a natural protein, some sort of grain byproduct, soybean meal, wheat midds, things like that, which are a good protein source, but they also have some energy available. We can feed supplements with or without vitamins and minerals. We can feed supplements with or without rumensin. It just depends on what's available in your area and what works best for your operation. But the big one is how easy is it to feed there versus the cost. So a lot of the convenience of tubs and blocks and cake and things like that, they're fairly easy to feed, might take a little bit of preparation, especially the tubs and blocks, which you actually have to drive out and drop in the pasture. But do you have also a cake feeder and something like that? So there are some convenient factors as well that you have to consider. So protein supplements, which I mainly consider during that late gestation phase, is where our protein's starting to run short in the pasture, and we're looking to help them meet those requirements through some sort of supplementation. Protein supplements improve forage intake, but they also improve forage digestibility, especially in those low quality forages. So that's the one, I guess it's positive in the terms that it promotes digestibility. Those cows can get more out of that low quality feed, but we're also potentially increasing the forage intake. So during times of drought and things, we want to make sure we're providing something that has an energy factor in there to help us offset that potential increase in forage intake. They can improve cow body weight and body condition score, and they've also been shown to reduce body weight loss in the cow at calving time. So we can help provide some of these nutrients and get a little bit more out of some of our forages that we have to feed. Now, energy supplements, I consider this more probably on the early lactation side of things, especially if we're providing a medium to high quality hay. A lot of times that's going to meet our protein demands, but maybe some of that energy due to the lactation might be a little limiting. But the big one, when we consider like I would say more of a grain-based energy supplement, is we're going to need daily supplementation on that because uh, energy supplements like grain work in the sense that they are actually reducing overall forage intake and replacing it with that grain. So this can sometimes work in, if we're running out of forages, we can maybe pick up some grain for a little cheaper, and that can help us meet those energy demands while overall feeding a little bit less of a full diet by feeding that grain or something like that. But we want to keep it steady every day because what happens, those cows consume the energy supplement, let's say on Monday, Tuesday we don't feed it, so they actually overcompensate their forage intake on Tuesday. Then we feed the energy supplement again on Wednesday, and then we bring that forage intake back down again. So we're running kind of a roller coaster there. And so if we feed it daily, we're consistently bringing down that forage intake. Whereas those protein supplements, we can feed them infrequently every 2 to 3 days. And because ruminants have the ability to recycle nitrogen or protein, we can continue to meet those needs on those non-supplement days. Uh, yeah. Okay. So just to throw out some different things that energy supplementation can impact, energy supplements prior to calving, that last 90 to 100 days prior to calving, we can see some improvements in body weight, especially if we have some of those really thin cows and we're really trying to make up for some loss in body condition there. And that can then help us with our rebreeding. It has been shown to have a little bit of fetal impact there with increased birth weights, which potentially could be a positive, could be a negative thing, depending on your operation. But we have seen some positive impacts with weaning weight and improvements in heifer reproduction. But our post-calving phase is where I really look to that energy supplement, where we see meeting those needs of the milk demand of those cows. It helps them have a shorter return to estrus and potential impact in increasing conception and preg rates. Obviously, the offspring impacts, right, because that potential improvement in milk quality and quantity, we can see some improvements in our calves. So we're going to walk through some examples here on maybe figuring out how much of a supplement we're going to need versus what if we're doing it full feeding and how that's impacting meeting our requirements. So if we just take our 1,400-pound cow right here, on average, this time of year, she's going to need to eat about 2% of her body weight in dry matter every day. So that's about 28 pounds dry matter. We'll get to some as-fed examples here in just a little bit. But looking at our pasture right now, if she's just out grazing, 5% protein, 50% energy, and Just take your percentages by a decimal based on what they're eating, if she's able to eat everything she can. So that pasture's providing a little less than 1.5 pounds of protein and about 14 pounds of energy every day. So if we think back to those requirements we looked at, right, late gestation, she's going to be short a little over 0.5 pound of protein and about 0.5 pound of energy. Well, a good rule of thumb for those out there grazing, if those cows can consume everything they need to eat every day and they're full, they're going to be pretty darn close to those energy requirements. It's the protein we're really starting to think about. Post-calving, right, if she's still out grazing, we haven't really provided her with anything, she has to full feed off of that low quality forage, we're really shorting her here. She's really drawing on a lot of those fat stores that she has, hopefully. So I know everybody cringes. We're going to do some algebra here. I'm sorry, everybody. But you can now go back and tell your math teacher that you used algebra after high school. So just think about that. I was kind of went, you're never going to use this ever again. This was my one time. But let's say we've got a 12.9% protein hay and a 54.6% energy hay. And we just want to provide a little bit of supplementation with her still full grazing out there. So we don't know how much we need. We do know the protein. And then just trying to think if there's I don't know if you can see my mouse. Sorry. And we know we need to make up that shortfall of 0.7 pounds of protein. So all we're going to do is we're going to solve for X. So 0.7, we bring this over, divide by 0.129. So in dry matter, she needs almost 5.5 pounds of this hay to meet her protein needs during pre-calving. When we get to our energy, we do the exact same equation, right? So we only need about 1 pound to meet our energy needs. So if we look between the two, because this is the higher amount, this is our most limiting, we need to actually feed for protein, not energy. So we're going to overfeed this energy by 4 pounds and feed just to meet this protein need. So that might sound okay, because she's got 28 pounds a day to consume. So we're probably going to help her. She can probably take in another few pounds of feed. When we get to post-calving and she's still out there full grazing, which yes, she has calved, so that fetus isn't encroaching on that room and capacity anymore. So she's going to eat probably closer to 3% of her body weight a day. We might be able to get this amount into her, another 16 pounds of hay just to meet the protein need. But because this is such a good quality forage, not the best in energy, we're still feeding 16 pounds to meet the protein need, and we're going to overfeed energy. So we can look at this and see, okay, how much do I need to supplement my cows to help us for maintenance? This does not include growth of any sort. This is just the maintenance of that fetus during pre-calving, and then the maintenance of the lactation during post-calving, and all her other maintenance requirements. If we have to put weight on her, we're going to have to feed more of this forage to help her with any sort of body condition change or growth. Oh, forgot I had the boxes there. So let's, oh gee, now I got click happy. So let's say we need to know, do we have enough of this hay in our hay yard to feed these cows? And let's say, okay, we're going to go 90 days pre-calving. We want to just do the supplement per head per day. And we've got a herd of 100 cows in this herd. So I just estimated at 6 pounds. This is as fed. So 6 pounds per head per day times 100 cows gives us 600 pounds a day for the herd, not accounting for any sort of waste. So 600 pounds over that 90-day period is 54,000 pounds total. Well, how much is that in tons? We need 27 tons of this forage. So really, if we got 100 cows, you know, counting, if we think about it a lot of times on that waste factor, you know, if we're just rolling out bales, that can be up to 50%. So we're probably rolling out a bale a day for this 100 head. Now, once again, this is an as-fed number here on the post-calving. We're going to feed for another 90 days. We want to get them to the breeding season and keep helping them. Maybe we haven't had a lot of forage availability out on the pasture yet. So now we're feeding 17 pounds per head per day times 100 cows. So 1,700 pounds for one day times the 90 days is 153,000 pounds, right? So we've jumped quite a bit. We've tripled our need. And so that's 76.5 tons. So probably looking at probably 2 bales a day of this forage that we had, which is all well and good. But in total for this example, you need 103 tons or 104 tons, not accounting for any waste. So if we think, well, if we need to feed 1,700 pounds so we can go, let's say 2 bales, well, and they waste 40 to 50% of it, that's 4 bales then. So then we're doubling this amount we're going to probably need. So I know there's a lot of numbers here, but I just wanted to give you an example of what if we have to full feed our cows instead of just supplement. So same dry matter, right? Pre-calving. We know this hay is 88% dry matter. The only reason I threw this in there is because we talk a lot in dry matter. But right, it only matters what you guys need to roll out every day. And so that's as fed. So we know we need about 32 pounds if we're going to full feed during late gestation of that, of a hay in general. So 3,200 pounds each day times 90 days is 288,000 pounds or 144 tons. So thinking back, 3,200 pounds a day, let's say our bales weigh 1,400 pounds, we're probably going to need to feed at least 4 bales now per day, accounting for a little bit of waste in there. Now, like I said, during post-calving, our cows, because that fetus isn't in there anymore, they've calved, that rumen capacity gets to expand a little bit further back to where it was. So we're probably feeding them close to 3% of their body weight. Well, that's 42 pounds dry matter or 48 pounds as fed. So 4,800 pounds a day, right? So 1,400 pound bales, now we're talking, what would that be? 14, it'd be 2,800 for 2. And then, so at least another 5 to 6 bales with the waste factor. Times that 90 days, 432,000 pounds over 90 days. In tons, 216 tons. So total, no waste in the tonnage accounted for here. We need 360 tons of our forage to meet the needs of our cows. So keeping that in mind, knowing what you have in your stack yard within your inventory can really help, oh my goodness, excuse me, help you make some management decisions based on the forages you have available and maybe when we need to effectively utilize high quality versus low quality forages. So the big one is that I look at for comparing different supplements to each other, whether that is a hay or a commercial-based supplement, is breaking everything down on a cost per pound of nutrient basis. So in this example, for that almost 13% protein hay that we used in a couple of those examples in determining how to supplement, it's $120 a ton. So just for pounds of protein, right, as a decimal, 12.9 as a decimal times 1 ton gets us 258 pounds of protein. This is dry matter, remember. So take our cost divided by the pounds gets us almost 50 cents per pound of protein. Do the same for energy, 11 cents per pound of energy. So if we use those examples on what's it going to cost us just to supplement our cows, we know that first example, we're feeding 6 pounds. Same with the protein. So in that 6 pounds, we're getting 0.77 pounds of protein, which is the shortfall we pretty much needed to make up. Times our price, 36 cents per head per day is where we're at in that cost per pound of protein and energy, to be honest. And then we go over here to post-calving. What's it going to cost us to feed per pound of protein during post-calving? Well, it's about a little over $1 per head per day just on those two nutrients for post-calving in a supplement. But we can take these numbers and go, okay, well, can I feed, let's say, an alfalfa-based cake as effectively as this? Or can I feed, I'm trying to think of a good, a wheat midds pellet maybe, or something like that. This allows you to compare those supplements to determine, okay, what's going to be most cost effective per pound of nutrient. But right, that doesn't get us to what's it going to cost us to feed our cows every day with each supplement, because that also is going to be altered by how much is going to be required to help meet those shortfalls. And then this did a full feeding where if we went to the 28 and the 42 pounds, so right, we're gonna increase our cost because we're full feeding. So $1.70 for the pre-calving, for both energy and protein. Now it gets a little bit different in the post-calving here. So 42 pounds, $3.15 per head per day. For the cost of the protein and $2.52 for the cost of the energy. So just bearing those in mind, but this is why I say, break it down on what happens if I have to do more than just supplement. So knowing what you have in those lots can really help you decide and help you make some management decisions, or at least, when you call Rose or myself to maybe put together a ration, we know which forages are more available or which ingredients are more available or which you have more of, so we can alter those rations accordingly. So what do you have in the hay yard? New versus that older hay. And I know most of us don't have a lot of especially really old hay right now because of the drought we experienced for 3 or 4 years. But we can find you a way to feed old hay because, it may not be the best quality, but honestly, we have beef cows. They can utilize a lot of older hay or straw, and we can still make a really good and nutrient-rich ration and meet those needs, but be a little more cost effective in utilizing some lower quality feeds. Do you have any grain available? What other forages might you have? What other additional supplements are you providing? Is there somewhere maybe some different feeds could be purchased? And then always looking at what's the quality of those feeds. Has a nutrient analysis been done? And if it has, what does that look like in comparison to some of the feeds available? So we talked a little bit more on pounds, right, and tons, but what's this all equate to for bales? Right, so we take our 3,200 pounds per feed per day on an as-fed basis. Let's say our bales weigh 1,300 pounds, so we just divide 3,200 by 1,300, excuse me. So we need, this can either be per day or per cow, but overall we need 2.5 bales per cow for the whole 100-day period, or in total for the whole 100 days, 100 cows, 250 bales. And that's, again, not accounting for any waste. So do you have that set back in the stack yard, or is there some other supplementation we need to think about? Right, this is the bare minimum, and it doesn't guarantee you're meeting those requirements either. That's where that quality analysis can come in. So just because we're full feeding something doesn't mean that we're still meeting those requirements. Post-calving, same thing, same example here, but now we need closer to 4 bales per cow and 370 bales per cow, or excuse me, for the 100 cows for the 100 days. So obviously we make bales that can be heavier than this, or lighter, depending on the quality of that forage. So we have to think about that as well. So in general, as you're thinking about feeding management, number one, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. If you have a program that works well with you and your management, keep doing what you're doing if those cows are looking good and they're getting bred every year. And design that feeding program to utilize what's available in your area. Like I said, just because I talk about it, or if I mention a feed or something and it's not available to you, obviously that doesn't help you. It's just something to consider as moving forward with your feeding management. Looking at those low quality feeds, supplementing them, what do I need to do to help meet the nutrient demands of our cows? But then there's times of underfeeding versus overfeeding. So I always throw this in there, right? Because we had that severe drought for 3 or 4 years, and a lot of cows, the hay we were able to feed was decent quality, but we had to underfeed those cows because honestly, we just didn't have anything available for them. And that is one thing to consider, is we can underfeed a really high quality, let's say an alfalfa or something like that. We can underfeed that, meet all our requirements, but those cows are not full, which means they're going to go out and pick and graze in the pasture. So there are some considerations there. And would that be better managed as maybe underfeeding the highest quality ingredients while still providing maybe a straw or something for gut fill? Now, overfeeding, something to consider there. Cows, just like everything, are only so efficient. So I generally recommend don't overfeed something like protein greater than about 110% of those requirements, because a lot of times what they're doing is excreting it out the back. And so we're kind of not being as cost effective with that nutrient. And do the best you can to reduce feed waste. I know that's easier said than done, as a lot of times we have feed grounds and we're rolling bales out and those cows are walking through it, they're laying on it and things. There's only so much we can do to reduce that feed waste. But one of the things too, is I understand, making them clean it up and stuff like that, but also look at what they're leaving behind. After you feed them, go out and take a look at what that bale looks like after they've wandered away and maybe they're out grazing, and see what they left behind. What did they pick through to leave versus what they consumed? Because sometimes what they leave behind is pretty indicative of their palatability. They don't want to eat that. They will if they are forced to, but sometimes, especially, in terms of like mold and things like that in some of our hay crops, which I know we haven't dealt with here in the last year or two. Hopefully, I keep hoping maybe this next year, like I'll stop talking about drought and start talking about moldy feeds again. But forcing them to eat some of those feeds may not be health-wise the best. So save those high quality feeds for when requirements are the highest, such as early lactation, or your replacement heifers, both those moving into their first calving season, but also those growing heifers as well. We can target if you're running out of pasture availability, some of our lower quality feeds during mid-gestation, if our cows are looking good, they have good body condition. But one thing to keep in mind is we can mix low and high quality feeds together and make a really good ration for our beef cows. But what's going to be the most economical and less labor intensive for you to feed sometimes as well? So like I said, labor is a big one, right? Is it simpler to spend a few hours and go cake all the cows? Is it more cost effective to roll out bales? These are all considerations. I gave you raw cost based on just the price of the hay. That did not account for any labor. So, right, it's how long does it take you to roll out a bale? Do you have the bale feeder on the back of the pickup? Do you have the cake feeder? Things like that. Um, Also the fuel, right? You know, fuel's a big input cost. And then what grazing is available still. So, one of the best tools we can use to see how our nutrition program is working for our cows is body condition score. Body condition score is a scale of 1 to 9, and it's just measuring the fat cover across those cows. And each body condition score to improve or decrease, however you look at it, is about 100 to 150 pounds. We aim for a score of 4 to 6 in terms of what we consider good body condition. They have enough fat cover to meet the needs of any sort of nutrient deprivation in terms of energy. So 1 to 3 is what we call, those are our really thin cows, the emaciated ones, and could really stand some extra groceries there to get them back up to where they need to be in terms of body condition to meet the demands for their nutrients. And oh, sorry, I lost my train of thought there. But I know every ranch always has those cows that probably may not aren't they aren't going to be a one. That's the downed cow that probably got sick and just hasn't done well. But everybody's out there has on the ranch has, you know, a body condition score 3, 4 in there, you know, looks like should gain some weight. But no matter what you do for her, no matter how well you pamper her, she never gains body condition. But she gets bred every year. She has a really good calf. And so those are the cows that fit your management style. What I'm more concerned is the cows that are a 6 or a 5 and they drop to a 3. You know, maybe there was an illness, or maybe she's just extremely stressed somehow with maybe she had a difficult calving, something like that, where she really lost some body condition, but she's normally a 5 to a 6. Those are the ones we're really focused on during this mid-gestation period to gain that body condition back. And I don't know why I keep talking with my hands while I'm talking to you guys online, but I'm a hand talker. Sorry if it looks like I'm moving my hands everywhere. Um, then that 4, 5, and 6 are our optimum is what we consider. So the 4s are a little on the thin side, but you know, could still stand to gain some weight. But that 5 to a 6, they look pretty good. One key feature of a 5, you're going to see those last 2 ribs. So just to kind of give you a baseline to look at. Then we have our 7, 8, 9s. Those are the extremely fat cows, what I always call the Bessies of the world, right? She's probably your favorite. She eats the cake out of your hand and everything, but she's the big girl out there. But the big one with that is the 7, 8, 9s will get you really prepared for that next breeding season, because they have all that extra energy to draw from to increase uterine repair more quickly. And so they're using that body condition where I always kind of give the Bessies a hard time is because typically if they're that fat, they are not doing their job as a cow. They are putting more into themselves than they are into that calf through milk, as well as then leading to that little dinky calf at weaning time. Now, don't go out and sell Bessie if she can stay, because I had one time I was at a meeting and I said everybody should sell the Bessies of the world because they aren't doing their job right. They're weaning that 300-pound calf, but she weighs 1,800 pounds throughout the year, and some poor child got a little upset with me about wanting to sell Bessie there. So you don't have to go out and sell Bessie. I'm just saying maybe she could do a little more for the operation and getting bred and providing a better calf. So I don't want to make the kids or the grandkids upset at me over that. So we have these opportunities, and it says here like the 8s and 9s can lose that 100 to 200 pounds probably. However, during late gestation and calving time is probably not our most effective time to have them lose that weight. They can lose that weight post calving after she gets bred back. And she's, we don't want her to go from, 18 to 1,500 pounds or 1,400 pounds in the span of a month, but she can stand to lose a little body conditions there and work a little more for that calf. So, uh, one of the things, you always get asked, well, when should I body condition score? And you can look at some of the documents and they're like, oh, you should do it all these times, choose 5, 6 times. Well, these are for more intensive systems. For us and our more extensive grazing systems where we don't really touch the cows except maybe 2, 3 times a year, those are the times I really say, bring a piece of paper, or if you're using a computer program, where you can really physically get your hands on those cows, is during those couple times a year when you're working them through a chute system. Maybe you're vaccinating or providing some sort of other injectable, or you're pouring or something like that. That's a good time to body condition score because you really got to get your hands on them. And so I usually choose kind of in that pre-calving or calving time, potentially breeding or pre-breeding, and then at weaning. So 2 to 3 times a year where you can physically get your hands on those cows and really feel what they're looking like. Now, like I said, we don't touch our cows that much in our extensive systems. So one kind of tool you can use is, as you're feeding this winter and you're driving or you're rolling bales out there, you're feeding some cake and you drive out, you roll the bales out and the cows come in, you turn around and you're driving right back by those cows, scrap piece of paper, every 5 to 10 head, write down a body condition score. Like I said, a 5 is those last 2 ribs will be visible. I know it gets a little harder with especially black-hided animals with a winter hair coat on them, but a lot of times you can still pick out those last 2 ribs. If you can see more than that, they are a lower than a 5. If you don't see any ribs, they're greater than a 5. When you're done, average those scores out, see where it lands. If let's say the first day you go out and do it, their average is a 5.5 or a 6. You go, oh, okay, cows look good and everything. The herd as an average looks pretty good. Wait a minimum of 2 weeks. Too much differentiation can happen in that week or two, where depending on how they're eating and stuff, can change that body condition. You want to give them a chance to actually change some condition. Do the exact same exercise. Doesn't have to be the same cows. Write it down again, average it. If it goes down, you go, okay, maybe I need to add a little bit more to my feed or a little bit more nutrient dense type of diet. If it stays the same and they're still at that 5.5 to a 6, you go, hey, still doing pretty good. And if they're gaining a little bit, that's not necessarily a bad thing either. Now we don't want them to go, extremely over, but it is just a tool we can use to help us monitor how our nutrition program is doing. So just run through our last little management tips here, but mixing those high and low quality feeds. So I always get a question on, well, how much straw can I feed without causing some compaction issues or not meeting those nutrient requirements? So rule of thumb for straw is no more than 50% of the diet of our mature cows up to the 3rd trimester. Then as that fetus really starts to encroach on the rumen capacity, we're going to drop that down to 25%. Heifers all year round, 25%. Like I said, rules of thumb. Now, we've accepted a little bit more risk with some of our cows due to drought, so they were feeding more straw. Big one with straw is the compaction as well as not meeting requirements. It's such a low quality feed that it doesn't flow through the digestive tract as efficiently as some of our other hays and forages. And so you always want to feed medium to a high quality forage with the straw to keep pulling that straw through with it through the digestive tract. We can limit feed those high quality feeds or high quality forages, but utilizing them at a high nutrient demand time frame as well. Keeping cattle full is extremely important. And like I said, we can limit the high quality feeds, but keeping them full with a lower quality feed, especially during times when the weather is extremely brutal, can really help us keep those cows moving through some of those times. But also, if we're limit feeding, those cows are going to start pushing fences. They're going to try and find that extra feed to keep themselves full. Using that body condition score as a tool to see how our nutrition management is matching up for our fetal development and keeping that cow where she needs to be in body condition as well. Good nutrition equals good colostrum and good milk quality and quantity. We need that healthy calf on the ground at calving time. Nutrition is the primary impact of that. And I'm not a reproductive physiologist, so I'm going to tell you nutrition is the most important part of your operation, just because I'm a nutritionist. But always keeping in mind what's happening 2 to 3 years ahead. Like I said, I wish we had the crystal ball to say, hey, next year we're going to be droughty. The following year we're going to have a bunch of rain. I don't know. I don't know anybody that does know that. But keeping forage stockpiled for those lean times of forage availability can really help us offset some of those high input costs during the droughts. So general recommendation from me is having 2 years of forage stockpiled. I know that's easier said than done, but just because you have it doesn't mean you need to feed it or sell it. Mainly in terms of the fact that we can hold back low quality forages and find effective means to feed them in the future versus not having that forage or some forage availability and you're having to purchase it. So just keep that in mind for our cows for the future as we're thinking of this next year, right? Because we're already preparing for the next breeding season. What's our pasture going to look like during the summer? We're probably looking at, should we graze our pastures a little differently? So how is that going to impact what happens to those calves in utero and things like that? So keeping that in mind for that 2 to 3 year period where you're constantly thinking, okay, how is what I'm doing this year going to impact next year and then the following years, right? Because not only are the calves that are going to get born this next spring, you're hoping those heifer calves are going to be replacements for your cows in the future. And how can we effectively feed these cows and make sure those calves have a good calving season, they come out healthy, and we're providing that nutrition. Like I said, I'm a nutritionist, so that's why I harp on nutrition, because it's most important. But that's all I had officially. I am just going to throw a little plug out here. We do have the Cattle Academy coming up in, well, about a week and a half now here in Miles City. I know for some of you it's probably not very close, but definitely take a look at that. But with that, I'll take any questions.
Thanks, Megan. Do we have any questions out there? You guys can either unmute yourself or write it in the chat. We have lots of people on here. We have Erica, who's a veterinarian up in Big Sandy. Maybe one of my questions would be is there's a lot of lick tubs out there, Megan, that are available, like biomass, chelated minerals, stuff like that. Do you have a preference on those lick tubs and mineral blocks that people are using for their cattle?
Well, as you know, Rose, we don't product shop or anything, but one of the big ones, at least with on the tub side of things, First off, I always like to see what's in the tub, obviously. What type of mineral are we looking at, and how much is it providing versus how much they have to consume of that. And usually for those lick tubs, if we're thinking, let's just say like a general molasses-based tub, they want those cows to consume, 3/4 to 1.5 pounds a day. So, easier said than done sometimes. Sometimes they're going to eat 6 pounds of, or you got one cow that eats 6 pounds of it. And what is that providing? So that's when I talked a little bit about those really high protein tubs. So that's one of the other things I'm going to look at is what are those protein sources? And I much prefer a natural type protein versus our non-protein nitrogens, because then we're providing both rumen degradable and rumen undegradable protein. And I think a good mix of that can really help our cows keep moving and keep production up. But so that's kind of one of those things. And a lot of our tubs have a mix of inorganic versus organic, or those chelated minerals now. And that's just to help try and keep costs down. And so I more look at the source and see what's going on there. Those organic sources of minerals are going to be more bioavailable for our cows, so a little bit better absorption rates and a little bit better utilization. But personally, I more just get it out there. But I also want to consider, so if let's say your cow's eating a 20% protein tub, and they're supposed to consume a pound a day. That's a supplement of 0.2 pounds of protein. So keeping that in mind, thinking back to that example I used, if we're a 1/2 pound short of protein on our pasture, is that 0.2 pounds they're consuming of that tub enough to meet that shortfall during this time of year, during the winter? And a lot of times that answer, unfortunately, is probably no. But with other supplements, if you're providing other feeds, obviously that it can be a really good supplement. But I consider them typically more of a mineral somehow to provide minerals in the vitamin program to your cow herd, versus necessarily being that high protein supplement out there on pasture. And that also are your cows consuming the correct amount? That's the hard one. We know we put it out there. General recommendation, I believe, for most tubs and blocks is between 25 to 30 head per tub or blocks. So keeping that in mind, so 100 head cow herd should probably have at least 3 to 4 of those out there, spread out accordingly. Things like that. And like I said, there's always the one cow that she parks herself on it too, because she likes it. And then there's the ones that may not get any of it because either they don't like it or she pushes them all out of the way.
I wonder about this because our operation, we put our cows up in the mountains, so getting mineral tubs to them, we don't do that in the summertime. We just give them salt. Is there research out there that kind of gives you, like, if you don't put those supplements out there for those cows, I mean, they're eating lush green grass, and that grass does provide some protein for them, but is there research out there showing those cows that are up in high mountainous areas, are they doing just as well as those cows that kind of stay low and have availability for lick tubs or supplementation all year round?
I'd have to look back through the research, but honestly, like I said, body conditions to me is the key. If those cows come off looking good, when in the fall when you're bringing them down and they look fine, body condition wise, that calf looks good, obviously the requirements are going to be met there. So I think that's key. And one thing to keep in mind, mineral program, I know you've heard me harp on it and stuff because it's one of my interests, but is extremely crucial. I recommend it year round. There are times we're not going to get mineral to them. I totally get it, especially in those high mountainous areas or forest allotments, things like that. Our mature cows, I'm going to be honest with you, they adapt to their surroundings. And it's not like if you don't put mineral out tomorrow because you ran out or something, or a lick tub with the mineral in it, they're going to be deficient the next day. Especially during times when that grass is nice, lush, and green, it's probably pretty darn close to meeting those requirements. And hopefully during the other periods of the year where maybe they do have access to mineral, they're storing it within their liver, and they're able to make up during those times of shortfall with those liver stores. The only thing I remember, really where I was like, oh yeah, where we ran into, I would say I heard of train wrecks, was producers calling, and it's been the horrible winter of 17, 18. And 18, 19 was extreme copper deficiency in some cows, but they had stopped feeding their mineral 5 years prior to that. So it took quite a few years for those cows to really become deficient. The biggest issue we can run into, I would say, more in those high molybdenum areas, really poor water quality areas, and areas of high iron, where we're feeding those, or they're drinking antagonists, and we aren't providing any sort of mineral supplement and haven't for quite a while. And it's really drawing that storage down. And high stress times, which hopefully they're up in the mountains, they've calved, they're living their life for the summer, and hopefully that high stress isn't happening at that time, like at calving or weaning.
Thank you. I have kind of monopolized the questions. Does anybody else out there have any questions for Megan? Oh, Sarah says, good stuff. Thanks from Idaho. Hello, Sarah Baker. Are you still with the Idaho Extension over there? Oh, good. Yeah.
Now you can say it's a multi-state program.
It is. Her mic isn't working. Probably because she has the radio up too loud. Thanks again so much, Megan. Well, it looks like everybody doesn't have any questions. I will provide Megan's information on the recording. There's a survey that we do as well that I'll provide for Megan once it's done, kind of on the quality and getting a feel for you guys, like who you are and what you are. And also the survey recording, I will provide Megan's slides as well. And Megan's, is it okay if I provide your contact information, your work office? I'll put that on that email as well. So I'm planning to get that done this afternoon. But our next topic is going to be with Dr. Rachel Endicott a week from today. And Rachel's going to talk about heifers versus cows, how to buy them, what to look for. But then she is also going to talk about heifer development, young cow management for improved retention in the herd, and much more. Since we spend a lot of money putting into these bred heifers and replacements, and if they go out of the herd quite quickly, that's going to be a problem and an issue. So we want the longevity of those cows to be in your herd. So that is something that Rachel's going to look at for next week. So if you haven't gone ahead and register, you can go through that Qualtics and redo that. At the end of all of these webinars, I'll send everybody all the recordings so you can look at them. So we had 34 people already viewed the one from last week, which is pretty good. So I just want to thank all of you for coming today. I want to thank Megan especially. And Megan, you must be part Italian because you talk with your hands.
Yeah.
There's always the joke of how do you make an Italian quiet? You grab their hands. It is true. I was sitting on my hands in the presentation. So I want to thank everybody again. Thank you, Megan, so much. Have a wonderful weekend and go Bobcats.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.